Wonderful the speaker is, and it's not hard at all to say you guys are wonderful. All right, tell me when you're ready to have this introduction. It's ready now? All right, good. Welcome, everybody, for the last in the series of weekly lectures, the Science for Peace lectures. And this time, it's a really wonderful treat that we're going to have to learn something about Project Drawdown, which I think is the most interesting research project that I've come across in the last several years. I think it's really constructive because they've got a list of things that can be done to reduce global warming, and they have numbers on how to do it, and they've got effectiveness they've calculated, and they can rank order. You know, what if you're going to put your effort into something, how do you know? Is it something that's really going to work, or is it something that is a waste of time? You know, you don't get much out of it. The beautiful thing is that Project Drawdown gives you some numerical answers to that. So it's a treat now for me to introduce David Burman and Liz Couture, who are going to give you as much as they can bring to us with the material from Project Drawdown. And if you don't get to see the video here, you can go home and see it on the live stream version. So, David and Liz.
Thank you, Betta. So there were two questions that had really been bothering me about this climate crisis that we find ourselves in. And the first was, how are we ever going to coordinate and measure all our emissions and reductions? After all, we do need to measure what we want to monitor, but it seems so overwhelming to me. The second thing bothering me was why, if we're in this existential predicament, people are so slow to come together in what we would really need, which is a World War II-like type of coalition to save the planet. Both questions, in my opinion, are answered in Paul Hawken's book, Drawdown. I first heard about the book a few months ago at our regular Citizens Climate Lobby meeting. And right away, I realized that these solutions show that not only has the math been done, but that they could bring together a critical mass of people around the world because the solutions are already out there. We need everyone working together on these solutions. Last month, I attended my first introduction to Drawdown by Unify Toronto and decided to just jump right in on the core team. I really don't feel good if I'm not contributing to even a small part of the solution. The way I feel is described in a good quote from Angela Bischoff's weekly newsletter, TO Greenspiration, which you may have heard of. The quote goes like this: "Don't be an optimist if it makes you relax. Don't be a pessimist if it makes you give up. Be an activist and ask, what can I do?" So good evening, everyone. My name is Liz Couture, and I'm very pleased to be here along with my colleague, David Berman, to share Drawdown with you. And I hope you will be as inspired as I was by the work that Paul Hawken and his team has produced as a gift to the world.
Okay. So as you've heard, my name is David Berman. I've actually been I'm on the board of Science for Peace, and I have been on the executive for a while. So I know this organization. About almost exactly 4 years ago, when I learned about the methane hydrate frozen in the East Siberian Arctic shelf, this very shallow sea that has thousands of gigatons of methane frozen in the permafrost. And listening to Russian scientists say that with the loss of the summer sea ice, that if even 1% of that methane hydrate were evaporated into methane, it would double the methane content of the atmosphere. And I panicked. What can I do? Well, one thing I could do was write an open letter to our illustrious Harper government to suggest that Canada should lead a team of the best hearts and minds of the world to do exactly what Liz proposed, have a prepare as if for war to reverse global warming. It was what was absolutely necessary. Well, of course, Canada did not act. It was a letter that many of you signed, and it was published in the CCPA Monitor in July 2014. But what I did not know was that at that very moment, Paul Hawken was assembling the best hearts and minds in the world to come up with solutions to reversing global warming, which goes to show that every time you think you're ahead of the game, you're actually just part of the movement. And so I was pleased. Also, so this is not only Project Drawdown, but it's brought to you by the Pachamama Alliance. And this is, Pachamama is, if I can get this mouse to work, and possibly even get a website here. That originates in the Achuar people of the Amazon, who in the mid-'80s, didn't work. Never mind, nothing works.
Well, you want me to try to get...
No, don't try anything.
Okay.
No, we've been trying things for over an hour, and I'm fed up with trying things. We are not going to try anything. Sorry.
All right.
So the Achuar people discovered that their indigenous neighbors were really in trouble with the oil extraction industry in the Amazon. And they surmised that any culture capable of that kind of destruction must be so completely cut off from reality that they're living in a kind of dream, what we would call a psychotic dream. And being a warrior society, they took it upon themselves to awaken the dreamer, which entailed reaching out to the global north. They made an alliance with some people in the United States because they had not had outside contact before 1970, and they needed help with dealing with the outside world. And so the Americans, I won't go into great detail, but the website does, they were helping create public health programs and community economic development and so on. But they kept telling the Americans that if you really want to help us preserve our lands, we need you to go to your world, and change the dream of the modern world, change the operating paradigm of the global north. It essentially changed the operating paradigm of capitalism. And they took them seriously. 10 years later, so by 2005, they launched the Awakening the Dreamer, Changing the Dream Symposium, which I heard about in 2008. I was jumping up and down excited at that point, took the facilitator training in 2009. And out of that came the question, this is a big issue, where do we start? And the obvious answer was, we'll start where you are, which is Toronto. And so out of that came Unify Toronto, which is to synergize the movement, to become the interstitial fluid amongst the change agents of the Greater Toronto Area. And so Unify Toronto has hosted or welcomed Pachamama, which has taken on as a project the Drawdown project to really fulfill its mission of bringing forth a spiritually fulfilling, socially just, and technologically, or should I say ecologically sustainable human presence on the planet. And so these are all consistent with the same thing. Now, since we are indigenously led, we are really doing all this on the behest of the indigenous people of the South, then we should do a land acknowledgement, because first acknowledge the land. The land is alive. The land supports us. The land keeps us alive. If we take care of the land will take care of us. It's a very strong indigenous concept. And Mother Earth is not a metaphor. The earth is alive. She is our mother. There's no way around it. Every atom of our body comes from the earth. We are the earth. Every atom of every being on this planet is part of the earth, which means we're all related. So we're related, us humans, we're related to the animals, to the trees, to the fish, to the insects, to the bacteria. We're all family. You may not like your relatives, but you recognize their family, which means you don't actively go to harm them. We also recognize the people that have cared for this land. People have been, according to historian Philip Cote, there have been Anishinaabeg here for 130,000 years, according to oral history. Anishinaabeg means the first people. And they were joined by the Huron, the Wendat, Petun people 8,000 years ago, the Seneca around the same time, and more recently the Mississaugas, the Anishinaabe of the New Credit. And according to the land claims, this is Anishinaabe land. This is Mississauga land that we're standing on. And so we acknowledge them. We acknowledge that they are the keepers of this land. And so we'll get on to my script here a little better. So this is where we are. Okay, now the drawdown, as Meta said, it is a solution to reversing global warming. If you think of almost all the threats to the war threats are based on climate change. They're based on desertification. They're based on changes. So climate change, you can say, is the number one existential threat. And, everybody knows that we're in trouble, whether they recognize it or not. You need more volume? Okay, so I thought Phyllis was having your hand behind her ear. Okay, want more volume? Okay, sorry.
You might turn it up. There's a place.
Okay, I don't know how to do that. I'll just, there, better. Closer to the mic?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Now, Liz, okay. Liz, we're going to switching back and forth here, so gives each of us a little break. Okay.
And help yourself to water if you need it.
Thank you.
So it is our intent and our hope that your hope is reawakened and inspired into committed to action as it did us, as we introduce you to Project Drawdown and the first comprehensive plan for reversing global warming. It's a vision of how we in Toronto can participate in making Drawdown happen. So when you came in, you got some handouts. So if you'd like to take notes, you can see that the next to last page has a blank sheet on the back. And the last sheet we would like to collect later. So please don't write any notes on that you would want to take home with you, because we'd like to collect that last sheet. Okay. Slide.
Right. So this is the dish with one spoon wampum. So the law of this land, since none of us is indigenous to this land, we're all guests here. And as guests, we should follow the laws. And one of the laws of this land is the dish with one spoon treaty covenant, which means stipulates do not take anything more than you need. Leave the rest for the other human and non-human beings on this planet. And always ask before you take. And always give something back if you take whatever you take. So the reciprocal relationship with the earth, we're not just to the earth, but with the earth. Now, and just to remember where we live. So Drawdown is a book. It is a movement. And it's also a point in time. That drawdown point is when carbon stops going into the atmosphere and is starting to decline, starting to be pulled out of the atmosphere into the earth where it belongs. You mentioned Paul Hawken. He's an author, he's an environmentalist, he's a very smart guy. And it was his idea, as you would have heard in the video had it worked, to assemble a group of scientists, thinkers, philosophers, activists, to the best hearts and minds in the world, to figure out what the solutions are. And they took a mass of hundreds of solutions and analyzed them according to the amount of carbon pulled out of the atmosphere, the cost of implementing each solution, and the amount of money saved compared to business as usual. And here's just a graph of graphic of the many solutions. They took them all, they ranked them 1 to 100. 80 of those are already in existence. So they specify things that are already happening and what is happening that could be scaled up. And then by putting numbers behind it, you can see it gives you a leg up. It gives you something to push on. Start, go. And so the question is, what part of the puzzle is each of us playing? There are obviously many solutions. Most of us are involved in something. Just going to remind myself what I had planned to say. Moving right along here. Yeah. So there's specifically things that are already in existence. So, but there were some surprises. When they put the mix and ranked them, up near the top, in fact, the very top, was refrigeration. The HCFCs that were used to replace the CFCs from the Montreal Protocol that were causing the ozone layer to disappear are thousands of times more powerful than CO2 in terms of global warming. So now we solved one problem, we got another. So now we need to work on air conditioners, refrigerators, any kind of cooling technology to make sure that these HCFCs do not leak out. So disposal, manufacture, distribution are all issues. And these are engineering, architecture issues. Right? Well, number 3 was food waste. Huge amounts of food are wasted every year. These go into landfill. These produce methane. These warm our planet. Half the food that's produced never leaves the farm. It's not pretty enough. Wayne Roberts, a food guru in Toronto, he calls it food porn. Food's got to be pretty in order to be sold, and that's a huge deficit. So we have a movement to reduce food waste. Educating girls and women. Way up, number 6. Family planning. If you add those two together, empowering girls and women is the number 1 solution to reversing global warming. So, kind of cool. Okay. I'm losing track of myself here. That's what happens when you get in a tangle around technology.
Are the handouts?
Yeah. Okay. Why don't you start with the handouts? Yeah. I think the cartoon will work. So the nice thing about these solutions is that every one of them is something that we would do anyway. We would like to do it. It will enhance our quality of life. It will produce more jobs. It will increase our quality of life. It will make the world a more pleasant place. And as a bonus, we get to reverse warming.
Okay. Great. Thank you, David. All right. So at this point, I would like to go over the basics of Drawdown, the science that was used, and the findings and the solutions of the Drawdown book. And we do have copies of the Drawdown book available for sale afterwards. It's not exactly the kind of book that you read cover to cover. It's got a great introduction and conclusion, and then all in between are all the different solutions that Paul Hawken and his group came up with. So you've been given the handout that says Drawdown Frequently Asked Questions, FAQ, and I'd just like to read the first 2 pages. So just sit back and relax or read along if you like, if you prefer to focus. Knowing that this handout, you can take a look at it later and have the overview for later reading. So as David mentioned, Drawdown is the point in time when the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere peak and then begin to decline on a year-to-year basis. The goal of the Drawdown project is to identify, measure, and model the 100 most impactful, substantive solutions to global warming that either reduce emissions or remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. Also, the goal was to determine whether it would be possible to achieve Drawdown within the next 30 years by the year 2050. So the Drawdown team is a coalition of over 200 contributors from more than 22 countries, including 62 researchers, 130 advisors, and 49 outside experts. How do we achieve Drawdown? To achieve Drawdown, We need to draw greenhouse gases down from the atmosphere and back to the earth. This already happens every year through photosynthesis, but we have to rebalance the quantity of emissions with the Earth's capacity to bring those gases back home. The mandate of the Drawdown team was to map, measure, and model the substantive, technological, ecological, and behavioral solutions, and then analyze their potential to reduce and draw down gases over the next 30 years. Before going further, just to clarify, the greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide, but also methane and fluorinated gases, all with different global warming impacts. To enable consistency, the scientists calculated the warming potential of different greenhouse gases and used conversion to carbon equivalent. In Drawdown, the references to the carbon dioxide include the impact of other equivalent greenhouse gases based on their global warming potential. The science behind the Drawdown solutions are based on assessment using a 3-stage process. Each solution is modeled so that 3 scenarios are created, including a plausible solution, an optimum solution, and that which is in between, which we refer to as the Drawdown solution. First came assessment. The project focused on existing solutions with sufficient data available for global modeling. The solutions were then evaluated based on their current performance, the scalability, the economic viability, and the potential to reduce gases over the 30 years. The 3-stage process used for each and every solution was first to analyze the technical reports with financial and climate data, second, to review the data to ensure integrity, and third, to assess the integration of the solutions and to eliminate double counting. So how is the modeling done? Each solution was measured and modeled to determine the global carbon impact between the years 2020 and 2050. The results are where all the math was done. They were ranked, they stated the amount of carbon avoided or requested or reduced or sequestered, and the cost to implement. Also calculated was what the net cost or net savings would be over time. The impacts are given in gigatons of carbon dioxide, referenced against a business as usual baseline. There were 3 scenarios modeled using different underlying assumptions. For example, the future growth rates, as well as the ongoing cost reductions resulting from improvements in technology. So that was considered as well. And there are 3 scenarios. 1, a plausible scenario, which is reached by 2060. 2, a middle drawdown scenario, which is reached by 2050. And 3, an optimum scenario, which reaches drawdown potentially as early as 2045. So here are the findings. The solutions are ranked on the total amount of carbon that they can potentially avoid or remove from the atmosphere on a global basis over 30 years. The top 80 solutions are grouped into 7 sectors, which are energy, food, women and girls, buildings and cities, land use, transport, and materials. So on your sheet, you'll see that there's top 10 ranked solutions. And it's interesting that the number 1 solution to reducing emissions is refrigeration management. I never expected that. So all the heating and cooling systems for our homes and businesses. My favorite solution is number 3, which is reducing food waste, and all around the world. But also interesting is that so high on the list at number 6 and number 7 comes educating girls and family planning. All the solutions have co-benefits. So we say that they are no regret solutions. They have so many advantages like saving money, creating jobs, enhancing security, advancing human health, eliminating hunger, preventing pollution, and restoring the environment. So you know what? These are all good things. No regrets for any of them. So what is the plan? Well, of the 80 ranked solutions, some have more impact than others. There is no silver bullet, and there are no small solutions. Reversing global warming is not possible unless we do them all. Under the second of the 3 drawdown scenarios over a 30-year period, the 80 solutions would draw down 1,422 gigatons of carbon. So it would equate to a net carbon reduction of 0.59 gigatons by 2050. So this is Drawdown. And in the glossary at the bottom, you see that a gigaton is a billion metric tons, which is like imagining 400,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools or a billion metric tons of water. The question many would ask is, what is the cost to reverse global warming? The answer is well described on page 222 of the Drawdown book, but basically it goes like this. The total cost to implement all 80 modeled solutions over 30 years is 129 trillion. And that's about 27 trillion over what business as usual would cost. But the net operating cost for all the solutions over 30 years, however, is actually a savings of 78 trillion. So far, we talked about 80 solutions, but the Drawdown book also includes 20 coming attractions, which are emerging solutions that are scientifically valid, but they don't have sufficient economic or scientific data to accurately model the net impact on carbon, and so they can't cost it at this point. Two examples are marine permaculture, and I don't know if you've heard of it, the Hyperloop for transportation. So finally, to quote the definition of global warming in the glossary of your handout, it refers to the surface temperature of the Earth, but climate change refers to the many changes that will occur due to the increase in greenhouse gases and the rise in the temperature. So Drawdown focuses on the reduction of greenhouse gases to reverse global warming. And the final 2 pages of your handout, they show the summary of Drawdown solutions by overall rank, and the Drawdown solutions sorted by the 7 sectors. So again, those sectors are land use, energy, food, transport, materials, women and girls, and building and cities. So please read the handout in more detail when you have a chance. And you can also go to the website, drawdown.org, or you could get the book if you want all the details. So thank you so much.
Okay. So I really love this slide. It's really, I think it tells it all. We're doing Drawdown because we want to survive, because we need to draw carbon out of the atmosphere, but actually we are creating a better world, and who cares if it isn't true? So this is just from the handout. So here's a look at the sectors by number, and here's a look at those sectors according to the proportion of carbon reduced. And it's interesting that where most of the talk about reducing carbon has been in the transport sector, like electric cars, mass transit, and so on. And actually, it's a relatively small portion of carbon. And the largest part is, okay, energy is a given, but food, way up at the top. So that has to do with food transportation, food production, reclamation of degraded soils, permaculture, all these things are all part of what we do to eat. And this is not technological. This is not high tech. This is just common sense. You go to the supermarket and you buy way more than you need. It stays in the back of your fridge. It goes off, or you worry about the best by date, and so then it goes into landfill. The very best, it'll go into your compost. But that's food waste. It's a huge amount of excess production. It's a huge amount of methane produced, and it's not necessary. And it's wasting a huge amount of money. The nice thing about these things is that the money saved, that's money, this is an investment. You put money into the investment of these social goods that we want, that we desire. We reduce carbon. We save a huge amount of money that we can invest in other things. we buy insurance. We don't know for sure if your house is going to burn down, but you buy insurance anyway. Right? That's a good argument for the people who say, "Oh, I'm not going to buy carbon taxes. You're trying to cheat me. All you want is just a money grab for the government." Well, ask them about insurance. Right? So this is insurance. And the other thing is, it's way more fun. We can have the very best time that any people have ever had on the history of this planet in taking on this challenge. So as Paul says in his video, either it's game over or game on. The odds are long, but who doesn't like challenges? So I think for me, the benefit of Drawdown is from this to this, right? Yes, why not? Mm-hmm. Right? It's to engage, particularly youth. These kids know what's going on, and their big question is it all over? Well, what are we doing to these kids if that's what we're telling them? So to me, the value of the Drawdown is to shift popular culture from a dystopian model to one of great possibilities, taking on this incredible enterprise and making it work, becoming the heroes of their story. So take a look at your handout and look at the sectors. I'm just going to go back a slide if I can figure this out. Come on, Mousy. And take a pencil and tick off all the places where you are already active. The solutions that you're already involved with. Take a minute. Now they are right there on the table. Chances are you're already involved with a number of them. So how many are already involved with 1 to 5? How many are involved with 5 to 10 solutions or more? Then look at the list again and think about organizations or individuals that you know who are involved in these solutions, either within Toronto or outside, or mostly in Toronto, in the Toronto area. I would say there's activity in most of them going on right here. And the beauty of the Drawdown is that it draws on what's already happening. You don't have to invent anything new. We heard Tom Rand speak here a few weeks ago talking about buying a building right on Augusta in College, right in Kensington Market, and using 5% of the equity to dig out geothermal, insulate, put in solar panels, change the light bulbs, and here it is right in downtown Toronto, at $20 a night, backpackers hostel, and he's making money. So it's not that we have to face hardship in order to bring about Drawdown. Quite the contrary. Quite the contrary. So who knows who can think of several organizations or individuals that are already involved with these solutions? How many?
Well, I represent Passive Buildings Canada to the Climate Action Network. Okay?
Right.
So I was actually shocked to see retrofit being 80, because in actual fact, technically I know the capacity is much, much greater, Actually, the numbers could be very different depending on which policy angle you take.
Okay, so I think I don't know the precise questions they use in their methodology. They estimated the gigatons of carbon that potentially could come down, and the cost. But the ranking was just in numbers of gigatons. Yeah. So but the thing is, these are all necessary. So not saying, well, abandon that and do this. No, don't. Do them all, right? And the other thing is, Paul says, we need to listen to the people that are naysayers, the ones that are saying it's just a tax grab. It's, we're saving the world for nothing. It's making the world a better place for nothing. It's big hoax. We need to listen to them too, because when there are political divisions, then we're not working together. We all need to be part of this story. And so, I think being morally superior is very satisfying, but it's not productive. So I think we need to be able to engage with people that we totally disagree with, which is why I like the idea of us all being family. Right? We can have very interesting dinner conversations with people that we totally disagree with. But if we recognize kin, then I think we can get somewhere. So let's move on to the sectors. So the nice thing about the sectors is what we have planned, and that we have a 13-month plan. This is Pachamama. Are you doing that? For my, I can't remember. I completely screwed around with these videos not working.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it.
Okay, we can do this. There is a 13-month plan to we have sector summits coming up, one a month over the next several months. And the next one is April 25th at Oisey in the Peace Lounge. In the evening and so we're bringing together a large number of people. In fact, Liz is coordinating it, involved with food production waste, how to reduce food waste, how to pull carbon out of the atmosphere and have a more efficient food system while we're at it. So, okay, Liz, why don't you talk about the 13-month plan? There are a number of these blitzes and so on. And I will take a breath.
So over the next 13 months, Unify Toronto is planning 7 sector summits, one summit for each of the sectors as Paul has divided them. And the first one that we're doing is the Food Sector Summit, which is on April 25th. It's in the evening, so everybody is welcome. And the idea is to bring together people who are already working on solutions, working on projects, in food sector, whether it's local urban gardening, whether it's like one speaker I've organized, her and her husband, they make these units. They're self-contained, self-sustainable units that grow food, in the indoors. They're even planning on, repurposing old factory space. And so it's like scalable. You can kind of just sort of add them together. So we're going to just try to get as many speakers as we can on the subject. We're going to have some interactive group sharing, group action. The idea then is just to try to connect people, in their area of interest, their area of expertise, and then possibly have some projects that start at a later time as well. My personal goal is to get more involved in reduced food waste. I know I saw this trailer for this video the other day. It's been around for a while, but it's called Just Eat It. And it was devastating how much food was being thrown in the dumps, behind the grocery stores and whatnot. And so 40% of food is wasted around the world. So surely that is low-hanging fruit, excuse the pun, and we can do something about that.
Actually, France has banned that practice.
France has. That's true. That's pretty recent. Yeah, glad to hear that. So the food sector summit will be the first one, then there'll be 6 others after that. And at the very end, the goal is February 2019, we'll have an all sector summit. And we're even hoping to perhaps have Paul Hawken come to that. That would be a treat. And we do have a core team. David and I are on the core team. We could always use more volunteers. So we prepare these introductions, and we're just trying to get the word out, and need volunteers for the sector summits as well. So the more the merrier, because we're trying to have fun, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's all I want to say at this point. Oh, sorry, there's one more thing. There are courses that the founders of this group, John and Satya, they do these courses. It's called Intro to No, it's not intro. It's course. It's a drawdown course.
So it involves going deeper into this material. This is a bare bones introduction.
Yeah.
It's even barer bones without the video material.
Yeah.
And the course, which I'm in the process of taking, gets you deeper into the material. It involves you in a project. So you take on a project of drawdown, one of these solutions or a few or overlapping, interlocking solutions, and it gives you a chance to research it on your own. And my project is to do a drawdown on my street at home. So to do an introduction, get my neighbors together and see if we can do something together. So it does allow you to become more fruitfully, using a food metaphor, engaged in the drawdown. Yeah.
And I think too, just by sort of knowing the book in depth, you've got something to reference when you talk to people, because there have been lots of projects and there have been lots of groups that have started. But I find that this can be a reference to me. I can just go to this and say, look, the numbers have been done. Here's some ideas. You can pick any area you want, and we can all be doing something. We can all be a part of the piece of the puzzle.
So one question that comes up is, well, so how do we do this? And where do we start? One of the videos that you're not going to see is by a guy called Will Grant, who's involved with the drawdown. He's a community organizer. And he reflects that there are 4 levels of engagement. One is the personal level. We recycle our stuff, we compost, we ride our bike, we take transit, we change our light bulbs, all these things. And that's necessary and important. The second level is the community, the family community. So you get your parents, your siblings, your children involved in being conscious and drawing down carbon using the tools, the solutions that are available, or the neighborhood. The third level is at the institutional level. So an example he uses is a doctor in a hospital who observed that a hospital is a huge consumer of energy, and proposed putting solar panels on the roof. And he talked to the CFO of the hospital, whom he knew, and it gave him a business model that, yes, it would actually save money by investing in solar panels. At the same time, he noticed that a lot of the energy was produced by incineration, which produced dioxins, which produced the cancer that they were trying to treat in the hospital. Duh. So he, once again, used the public health model to change the operating paradigm of this hospital to be more sustainable. I actually think sustainable is probably passé now. We're talking about regeneration at this point. Sustainability we're too late for that. But nevertheless, to be a viable carbon drawing solution within that institution. The nice thing about that is once you've got an institution that is operating on drawdown assumptions, then other institutions around are going to say, oh, how do you do that? And they're going to want to play too. An example is that there's a church in North York, a Catholic church that was built on entirely a LEED specifications. So it's one of the most progressive churches in the city. And churches in the neighborhood are thinking, oh, why don't we have good insulation? Why don't we have solar panels? And so it's infectious when you start doing things that work. And then there's the fourth level, which is the political, which is writing letters to your MP and signing petitions and going in marches and that sort of thing. And what he reflects is that most activity takes place at the personal and the political level, but most of the effective action takes place at the neighborhood and institutional levels. So these are areas where we can concentrate, which tend to be neglected because I guess it's kind of scary to go out there and start talking to your boss and your colleagues and so on. But that's where it could be most effective. He makes another observation that when he works with youth, they tell him, if it's not fun, forget it. We're not playing. If there's not an opportunity to socialize, to become engaged, to make it into a party, then they're not interested. And actually, that's a pretty good lesson because, being a doer revolutionary and carrying the weight of all these obstacles and all this work we have to do, it doesn't last. You burn out. Or we turn off. We say, okay, I'm done. So if we're socially engaged and having a good time and playing with it, then it's not so much work, actually, and we'll be more effective. And we're more likely to get other people to play as well. So I think, if we're having fun doing it, it's not a contradiction at all. Far from it. So that's something else. There's another teaching from that. So what do we want? What do I want you to get out of this? Well, most of all, learn to have fun with this, I think. Because if we're not enjoying ourselves, we won't continue. We'll give up. We'll get tired. So I find I'm having the best time of my life, actually. And I'm feeling engaged, and I meet incredible people, and it energizes me. And I suspect that would be true of other people too.
I think speaking of people, I would like to get to know the audience a little bit better. Let's have one of those sharing times we were planning.
Why don't you do that?
Okay, all right. Okay. So just want to spend a couple of minutes partnering up and sharing what you think about these ideas. Maybe you've got some positive feelings, maybe you've got some negative feelings. Maybe sharing the kinds of things that you've been involved with in your own emissions reductions goals, maybe around the house or business. And then we can share maybe with the group. So just a couple of minutes. And then when the thunder tube goes off, have you ever heard of thunder tube? You will hear a thunder tube. When that thunder tube goes off, you'll know it's time to end. So we'll do a couple of minutes on it. Just one question first, yes?
I have a low-tech solution.
A low-tech solution? For what?
Global warming.
For global warming? What would that be?
Grab a pail, go down to the beach, scoop up some water from the lake, and pour it onto the beach. If 10 people do that, nothing will change. If 10,000 people do that, the world might change. If the idea is posted on the internet to show what Toronto is doing, other parts of the world might copy Toronto, and that would be a low-tech solution as far as global warming.
Yes, thank you. I think what your point is that, we all have to get involved and we all have to be models for each other. And this project, it seems to be growing legs, and it's going to take off on its own. And whether or not I keep up with it, I'm planning to, but I think slowly but surely people will realize that, we can all work with that pail and do what we need to do it. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so a couple of minutes, just pairing up.
If you're into it.
You're my partner.
Just what was the question, Liz? What was the question?
Of what I want them to do?
Yeah.
So I'd like you to just talk to each other about what your thoughts are in general about global warming, about the solutions that we've discussed in the book, what your involvement might possibly be, what your involvement has been, what you've been working on in the past, and then maybe just share a little bit at the end. Okay?
We've got a revolution going here. Somebody wants to make this speech, and I want to hear it.
He already said it. He already said it.
I want to know what this pail of water is going to do. Can we stop and get an answer because other people want to know too, before we go on.
Take care, Steve.
I wasn't being metaphorical. I honestly am a low-tech person, and I really think that if a person grabs a pail, goes down to Lake Ontario, to the beach, scoops up some water from the lake, and pours it onto the beach, it would be obviously a very tiny amount of impact on the planet. But what if thousands of people were doing that in Toronto, can go down to Woodbine Beach?
That's the beach story.
We want to know where do you think the water's going? I mean,
The water would be poured onto the beach, and if it is posted on the internet,
where does the water go then?
The physics. What's the benefit?
the physics of pouring water onto the beach
Yeah.
is the water is no longer in the lake. Global warming basically. Global warming basically means there's too much water in the world. The glaciers melt, the ocean levels rise, flooding takes place, death and destruction takes place. That's like basically certainly one of the aspects of global warming.
No, we put 7% more moisture in the atmosphere. Basically, when you raise the temperature of the atmosphere 1 degree centigrade, you've got 7% more moisture in the atmosphere. But pouring water on the beach isn't going to make a difference in evapotranspiration or anything. So you haven't explained why.
I'm saying there's too much water in the world.
Well,
I think it's probably not necessary to argue the fine points at this point.
But did you notice the flooding that took place at Lake Ontario last year? Where we had flooding, and you saw that small lake that formed at Woodbine Beach.
Okay.
And it says to me there's too much water in the world.
Fair enough. Let's move on.
Yes, question?
Can you assess what the impact is of a natural phenomenon such as an erupting volcano on the global warming issue, the production of CO2, etc.?
I'm sure it has been done. I'm not a geophysicist, so I'm not the one to answer that question. But these are phenomena that do have data, and they can be researched.
Well, the reason I ask is I'm quite prepared to be told that I was told false information. I understood that an eruption such as the one we had a few years ago, in the very short time that the eruption occurred, produced more CO2.
No, that's completely.
I'm sorry?
It's actually not true at all.
Okay, that's what I need to know.
It produces a lot of sulfur. What happens is the sulfur goes up in the atmosphere and produces temporary cooling. But it has nothing to do with the quantity of carbon dioxide produced. That's something that climate deniers like to throw out. You go to skepticalscience.com or .org,
Okay.
and they have all the responses to these climate deniers, canards, and myths that they put up. I mean, volcanoes can be part of the natural cycle, but it's more the sulfur pieces, not the carbon dioxide.
Okay, so it's skeptical science online.
Yeah, skeptical science. That will tell you. That'll give a very good response in different levels.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you.
Chai?
Yeah, I have a creative solution I'm working on. I mean, it's not fully operational,
Okay.
but I'm onto it. What I'm doing is, as perhaps you know, in Toronto they throw everything, including big mirrors. And I have picked up a lot of mirrors, and I'm putting them on my north fence of the house. And that way, I'm doubling, so to say, the sunshine on my vegetable patch. And I think it will increase few weeks of, in those early spring and late fall, my growing season, if nothing else. And during the summer, I'll have bumper crop, so to say, with higher temperatures and more sunshine. So,
Just I was a gardener, like backyard gardener, not very good at all. Just be careful when on the really hot days, make sure that isn't beaming right on your plants.
on a very really hot day, I don't think we get them here, but in the sense that it will burn something.
Yeah.
But if I feel that that is happening, I can always turn the mirror around. That's not a big deal.
Okay. Good.
So,
Yes,
anyway,
sir.
I just thought I'd tell you, the advantage of that is, of course, if I grow more food in my backyard, then there will be less transportation delays, and in that sense, I reduce the carbon.
Urban gardening, absolutely.
Local growth of food is better than shipped food.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And there are a number of organizations in Toronto, not far from the tree, will harvest your fruit trees that often go untended. And, so they'll harvest your tree, they'll share the food with you, and they'll share the rest with people in need.
I know that.
Yeah.
But
There's another
nobody-
gardening group that will garden your backyard if you don't have the energy to do it yourself. And
I have
then
a lot of energy, but nobody is using mirrors yet, as far as I know.
okay.
I think you had a question, sir?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to Meta for all your years of
Yes,
organizing these.
yes,
My
excellent.
pleasure, thank you.
I get more dark as we go.
Do you?
A comment on the whole idea, I think it's wonderful. I'm a little surprised to see that 2050 is the date at which we might aim for as the date when CO2 starts going down. I thought from my incomplete reading that we need to be ahead of that by a long way.
Yeah.
Because that implies that either it's going to be stable until 2050 or that it's going to carry on increasing up to 2050. So I'd like to, maybe that's addressed in the document, why 2050? I would have thought we need to be making headway much earlier. Now also, it refers to the thing that I find most important of all under the mandate, behavioral solutions. I think this is the key. Now, the paradigm around the world is the capitalist system and the market economy. The market economy that encourages you, because of your short-term perspective, to consume shit. And we're all consumers of crap and shit and stuff, housing and energy and so on. And that is the dominant paradigm in the current world. And unless that's changed, I would put it to community here that as long as consumption is considered a good thing, and that's the paradigm that drives the educated people, the most advanced people, the most educated women and girls in the world. The most educated, Canada is supposed to be always praising its education system. What do we produce? We produce 35 million consumers who want to get their happiness out of consuming stuff. And I don't see anywhere in the agenda that tackles this. So that brings us to the question that you raised about how do we do it?
Yeah.
I mean, until somehow or other, and I'm not optimistic.
Yeah.
For instance, you referred to finally, the democratic system has a so-called, puts it in the hands of citizens who are voters to vote, and they were encouraged to vote for their short-term interest. We're about to vote in Doug Ford as Premier of Ontario.
You mean you mean Drug Ford?
Without much doubt, and this is the equivalent of putting in a Donald Trump.
I agree.
But that's because of people's short-term perspective, and this is among the better educated thing in the world.
I agree.
Well, World War II, finally, you referred to
Yes.
Nobody asked the people to vote to go to war in Britain.
No.
I don't think people were asked in Britain in Canada to go to war, whether they had a vote. The governments decided. And if they had been all the evidence, sociological evidences, they would have said, no thanks, we've had enough of this shit, or let somebody else fight, Mr. So I know, where is the sociological evidence that such a change can take place through, as long as the current paradigm regarding consumption exists? I'm an old lefty. I have no confidence that Canada, the good educated Canada we tell ourselves is tirelessly, is on the way to even meeting its 2030
That's true.
target.
We're not on the way to meeting our targets.
We emit 16 tons per head of CO2.
Yeah, there's a comment at the back. Yes. Sorry, the fellow in the blue shirt. He's been eager for a long time.
To speak to the most recent comment on behavioral change, I would like to propose that we also consider solutions that would look at the dignity of the person. That when a person feels dignified and is not scrambling for their survival, then they are able to think of the common good and think outside themselves, rather than just think about the next day or the next hour. Speaking to that, I would propose also thinking about something like the guaranteed minimum income, which might enhance the dignity of the person. And to tell a short story, that I recently been reading this book called The Oil Patch, which is about the development of the oil sands or tar sands in Alberta. And there is a story in that book about the people from the Atlantic provinces that after all the forestry, the coal mining, the fisheries all fell apart over there, then they no longer had the independence to make a living, and their dignity was eroded as such. And when you are threatened by poverty, then things go badly. And so a lot of these people from the Atlantic provinces migrated to Fort McMurray and Alberta, and they migrate back and forth, which creates problems that they leave their families back home. They're very stressed out. They feel guilty, and when they come back home, then they spend and splurge on consumerism and on status symbols to make up for those undignified feelings of guilt and social awkwardness. And so I think that a lot of, or some of these solutions could be enhanced by enhancing the dignity of the person.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I agree. You had a comment?
I just referencing, you mentioned the awakening the dreamer, which seems to relate to what the last gentleman was saying. And there is definitely a synergy that you have going with that movement as well, which I think is a little hope for sort of trying to get people to see things differently. And totally kind of unrelated, something that gave me hope a little while ago was my financial advisor actually came to me and he said, we have to change the way we think. The models that I've been given to use do not work anymore. And he told me that climate change was hoax when I first told him about it. He's come all the way around, and now he sees the whole sort of economic premise that we have in Canada as not working. Which I'm hoping if he's one, there'll be more and more people who start seeing that we do need a change in the way we
How did he come around?
Because I didn't get it, and I've mentioned other people.
Okay.
No, let them repeat it.
Okay, I'll summarize what I think I heard you say. So you're saying your financial advisor, who initially had been an arch skeptic, has come fully around to realizing that the current model is not working and can't work and needs to change. And
that gave her hope.
And that gives hope to that there could be change. My feeling about consumerism is I agree with you entirely. One thing that is not addressed specifically in the Drawdown, but it is addressed specifically in the Awakening the Dreamer Symposium, is the we can call it spiritual impoverishment, if you like, our disconnectedness from ourselves, from each other, from the planet, and we're driven to have a relationship with things because we're so empty inside. We act out of loneliness, we act out of our separation, our atomization. And so the hope of a project like this, if we can get people engaged in wanting to produce something of real value, is that we don't need to buy little widgets and throw out our latest iPhone because there's another one that's even better. That if we're more engaged, or if we're more fulfilled within ourselves, then there's a better chance that we can resist the consumer siren. And that's my hope, okay? And if we don't have hope, then we give up, and I'm not going to give up. So I think another thing is, if you listen to Fritz Schumacher, Small is Beautiful, he has a beautiful quote saying, if we think it's too late, we won't do anything. If we think there's enough time, we won't do anything. So we just keep doing what we're doing, which feeds into Angela Bischoff's quote earlier about positive. If you're optimistic, you'll be complacent, and if you're pessimistic, you're going to shut down. So I think a lot of the issues we're faced with is too much information. We're just bombarded with things that we can't cope with, and our brains shut down. Even if we say, yes, global warming is a real issue, but I can't deal with this right now. Right? So, yes?
I see the one initiative I'm keen on, as well as the academic flying less initiative, which I said, and there's something that strikes me, because when I was looking at the numbers here, it said aviation 5 gigatons. But when I do my own carbon footprint, my own carbon footprint, primarily from flying to academic conferences once a year, is very often the biggest single item in my footprint is aviation. So I can easily get 3 tons from one return trip to whatever, to Texas or to Vancouver, carbon. And as soon as people have enough money to make that flight, you will very often make it either for personal social reasons or for professional reasons.
Right. So one of the solutions here is telepresence.
I got to go by train.
Oh no, that actually burns more carbon. If I go to Vancouver to visit my brother or to a conference, it's an old diesel engine. It goes up over the Great Lakes and up and down and it actually burns more carbon taking the train than it does flying.
Not per person.
Yeah, no, per person, even that per person. Yeah, there's
How about bus? Same thing?
No, bus is better. Bus would be better.
There's a comment over here. Yes?
I have 2 just small questions. One is, can you tell me why in the drawdown solutions by sector under transport?
Yes.
I don't see, I see electric bikes, but what about just ordinarily human cycling?
Well, there's a section called bike-friendly cities. So it's under cities and buildings. So it's in a different sector.
Oh yeah, bike infrastructure.
Yeah. So walkable cities and bike infrastructure are built in there.
Thank you for that. Yeah. The other comment I would make is, I just wonder how this might fit into this what I'm thinking of might fit into the general idea, and that is that, to my understanding, there's a tremendous amount of land sitting northeast of Toronto in northern Whitby, which land was expropriated, as people may remember, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, with the towards the object of possibly building a second airport.
Right.
Now, my understanding is a lot of that land is prime farmland. There are organizations and people that were kicked out of their land, and they want to get back and use it for farming.
Yes.
And my point is, wouldn't this fit very well into our whole agenda that we've got it? We're talking about aviation, so we don't need another airport.
Right.
So I would just like
it is being used for farms.
Pardon?
It is being used for farms.
Is it all of it?
Farming is continuing. Yeah.
But my understanding is that there's still a lot of the land that hasn't been returned to the owners.
Well, it's. I think the Rouge Park, for one thing, has been expanded to take into a lot of that. So it is actually, and there is a movement within Pickering to advance that. But you're absolutely right. Good farm management, reclamation of soils. This is all part of the solutions. And regarding travel to conferences, there's a section here on telepresencing.
Right. So that's I think 2. I mean, I can see so there's 2 plus 5. You got 7 gigatons total.
Right.
I'm sure the numbers are correct, but it just seems when I look at my own footprint over the last 10 years, and it's primarily academic conferences. Right. Literally 50% of my footprint is aviation. So when they say 5 tons for aviation, are they talking about technical? That's technical improvements in aviation. Or are they talking about shutting down, like reducing aviation altogether?
I don't know. Yeah. I'm guessing improvements in aviation, but I'm just trying to remember the actual page. But I think it is greater carbon efficiency in aviation.
Yeah.
I think my understanding is they are focusing on extant solutions.
Well, so the other question I have is, he's really like all the things he listed they're not policy things like carbon prices or regulation. Yeah. You're not talking about overall market instruments. They're talking about tending to be talking about primarily technological developments. So
technological or social, yes.
With very minor social or somewhat minor changes in social behavior. So if you had bigger policy instruments, you can get a different picture.
I think that's true. I think they've deliberately steered away from that because it would depend on which country you're in.
Yeah.
And for instance, family planning, through education of girls, you're going to have girls marrying later and having fewer children and raising them with better prospects. And so that in itself is a carbon reduction. But each country would have different ideas of what reducing the number of children is. So you can't dictate unless there's a world body that can come to an agreement, like a Montreal Protocol, for instance. So they're leaving it direct. They're keeping it, I think, within the realm of what could probably happen outside of a massive dictatorship of social control. Yeah, Meta?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to this thing about educating girls and family planning, because the last talk show that I did the other day on Monday, every Monday night from 8 to 9 on the Peace Magazine not website, but Facebook page.
Can you turn around so people can hear?
Every Monday night I run a talk show about some of these issues on the Peace Magazine Facebook page, and I urge you to watch that. The last one we did this Monday was about educating girls and the impact on family size, which of course is a major factor on global warming if you reduce the number of people that are being produced. And we had not only a man in California who had spent his whole life working on family planning, and who worked on, they were very concerned about the Sahel, because the Sahel in Africa is the place where the birth rate is the highest in the world. The average woman has something like 8 children or something like that. And it's not getting any better. So the question is, how do you reduce something like that? And one of the 3 speakers was a man named William Ryerson, who's actually a descendant of the guy who created Ryerson here in Toronto. And he runs a place called Population Media Center, where his method of changing behavior, cultural patterns, is to use soap operas. Mm-hmm. And he shows there's a whole technique for developing a fictional program that goes on maybe a couple of years and works through the issues in the minds of the average person in any given society. They actually have to speak the same language and produce these novellas for the average person to read or watch. And it has a huge impact on changing public notions about how many children they should have. So I personally want to encourage people to think in terms of not having necessarily the government come in and do the kinds of things they were doing in India during Indira Gandhi's period, but have a more voluntary system where people produce entertainment that is also illustrative of the kind of behavior you want to see adopted. And if people actually get to liking the people in the story, they begin to emulate them, and it changes even birth rates and many, many other things, literacy rates, all kinds of things you can change just by soap operas. There. Thank you for my speech, for giving me the chance to ventilate my wish.
And that's true of the whole area of Drawdown. I think what we're trying to do really is shift popular culture, which includes consumerism, includes this cartoon, which is my crude drawing, because I couldn't find the original that I'd seen years ago, but it has to do with David Corden in his book, Change the Story, Change the Future. And so what Meta's talking about is the stories which change consciousness, which change behavior. And we are stories. We operate through stories. Every memory is a story. And so Corden is saying the story that is told in the business pages and in the popular media is we have to keep growing the economy, and the economy exists in order to grow, and it exists in order to make money, right? Well, if that's true, compare that to an economy that exists in order to support the sacred living earth, and the two are not compatible. So the choice is money or life. Choose. Which reminded me of this cartoon I'd seen years ago of a holdup saying, well, take my life, I need my money.
Love it.
Yes.
Just to comment on population, I mean, there's been no addressing the fact that it's quite possible that a child has already been born who will live 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So, notwithstanding the fact that Africans are now surviving, which I think is a good thing.
I agree.
Babies are surviving. What about all those old geezers who are living too long? I mean, it looks like as medicine is making great headway, the Western world is going to invest more and more money in keeping leeches like me alive.
We're full of contradictions. Contradictions are one of our beautiful challenges that we can play with, because every one of us is full of contradictions.
Yes.
And our society is full of contradictions, and our government is full of contradictions. And we can despair, or we can play with it. And I think I like to play.
I wasn't fair.
He wants to play too.
Yeah, but I think in dealing with the story, I think this is where Drawdown comes in. It's part of the story. The reason I started with this Indigenous context, and I think we can probably end here. The Indigenous context that's the story. This is we need a story that is larger. It's bigger than any of the solutions. It's bigger than all the solutions. Drawdown, carbon is part of it, but I think we need to think of our relationships. We think of, if we're all related, then I think we'll think differently, we'll feel differently, more than anything feeling. From an Indigenous perspective, we don't just think with our minds, we think with our bodies. Our bodies are way smarter than our minds. So if we can process emotionally, if we can process through introspection, if we can process through our physical bodies, as well as through our minds, and reflect amongst our different parts, then I think we'll be way wiser. So I love the phrase "all my relations," which is a constant reminder that we are related to everything. We are related not just to the human beings, but to every life form. So we're related to every water molecule, every stone, every atom, every bit of air.
Every Ebola virus. No.
Every viruses, bacteria, they are all part of they're part of us. It's part of life, right? And so if we can accept that and embrace it, then I think we have a better chance. So I'd like to end, if you're at any Indigenous gathering, every discourse is ended with "all my relations." And it means a reminder that it's all my relations, in a personal statement of reminding of my connectedness. And so I think, unless you had something else you wanted to end with?
No, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for being here, for Meta, for organizing, and for all the great questions and interest.
Yeah.
And I hope to see you at some of our other events. And please do leave us some of your contacts if you think, if you think that they would be interested in being speakers for us or attending, one of our sector summits. Please do pass the word. Right. And I think there's one more question, Chai.
Yeah, your sector summit on April 25.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't specified it. Is it a 2-hour thing, all-day thing?
Sorry, it's 2 hours. Yeah, it's at the Oise
at the Peace Lounge in the evening.
It's in the
evening of Wednesday, the 25th.
What time in the evening, please?
7 to 9. Yep.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you. This has really been very, very wonderful.
Thank you.
And I should have said something at the beginning about what we normally do. After one of these talks, we go over to the Prenup Pub for supper. I invite our speakers to supper, and you can come and bring your own credit card. Yeah. Because it's a great pub with good Belgian food, if you're interested. So if you want to go over there, come up here, and I'll show you how to get there. And please take...
We have some books for sale, if you're interested.
That's good.
How much are they?
$30.
Oh.
I have mine on, frankly, I use ebooks a lot, but this is not good on an ebook.
No, you need the pictures.
You need the book.
And the explanations are more involved than in the website. Another thing is that there is another analysis iteration going on right now. So some of your questions about, relationship of how much of each and feasibility, these are all happening. And your questions, like I have questions, I give them back to Pachamama and say, okay, so it's a work in progress.
Yeah.